The deception of weakness. Grand Marshal Vyx Thor of the Kraxan Empire stood aboard the command deck of the Eternal Dominion, his flagship representing the mightiest military force in known space. The holographic display before him showed a deceptively peaceful blue planet, Earth. His scaled lips curled into what passed for a smile among his species as he observed the primitive orbital structures and handful of spacecraft moving in predictable patterns around the planet. Their response to our demand for vassalage was unexpected, First Tactician Zareth noted, her crystalline appendages shifting in a pattern that indicated confusion. They refused to acknowledge our superiority, despite their obvious technological inadequacy. Vyx Thor's secondary eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture of amusement. Primitive species often mistake their ignorance for strength. They cannot comprehend the gulf between their achievements and ours. He gestured at the display with one of his primary arms. Look at their pitiful orbital presence. Barely 100 vessels, most no more sophisticated than cargo haulers. The Kraxan battle fleet numbered 10,000 ships, each one carrying enough firepower to level a continent. Their arrival in Earth's system had been deliberately overwhelming, a show of force meant to convince the humans to surrender without resistance. Instead, they had received a calm but firm refusal from Earth's governing body. Deep beneath Earth's Pacific Ocean, Admiral Naira Kadesh stood in the command center of Atlantis Prime, the largest of humanity's hidden cities. The vast chamber, carved from the ocean floor and reinforced with materials that didn't exist in any alien database, hummed with activity. Holographic displays showed the positions of every Kraxan vessel, their weapon status, shield configurations, and the complex calculations predicting their likely tactical responses. They're proceeding exactly as the behavioral models predicted, Director of Intelligence Raj Patel noted, his dark eyes reflecting the blue glow of the tactical displays. Their formation is textbook Kraxan subjugation protocol, designed to intimidate rather than optimize for actual combat. Naira nodded, her silver hair catching the light as she studied the displays. For 3 centuries, humanity had prepared for this moment. While maintaining a careful facade of technological mediocrity above the waves, they had built an unprecedented civilization in the depths. The oceans had become humanity's shield, laboratory, and forge. Signal all commands, she ordered, her voice carrying the weight of generations of preparation. Operation Deep Reveal is now active. Begin emergence sequence on my mark. Throughout Earth's oceans, massive structures began to move. In the Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, and Arctic oceans, vast sections of what appeared to be natural seafloor split apart, revealing the true extent of humanity's achievement. Cities larger than continents had been built in secret, housing not only millions of people but also the greatest fleet ever constructed. Aboard the Eternal Dominion, alarms began to sound. Marshal. The sensor officer's voice cracked with disbelief. Energy signatures, thousands of them, rising from the planet's oceans. Vyx Thor rushed to the main display, his confidence evaporating as he watched humanity's true face reveal itself. Not dozens or hundreds of ships, but hundreds of thousands began to rise from the waters. Each vessel incorporated technologies that the Kraxan Empire's best scientists had deemed theoretically impossible. Impossible, he whispered, all 4 of his hearts racing. Their industrial capacity, their energy signatures, this cannot be. A transmission cut through the chaos on his bridge, and a hologram appeared, a human woman with dark skin and commanding presence. This is Admiral Naira Kadesh of the Terran Defense Force. For 3 centuries, we have watched your empire expand through subjugation and conquest. We studied your tactics, your technology, and your weaknesses. Everything you thought you knew about Earth was carefully crafted to serve our purposes. The first wave of Earth vessels moved with impossible grace, their drives operating on principles that defied conventional physics. They flowed through space like living things, their formation shifts precise and purposeful. The Kraxan fleet's standard combat algorithms failed to predict their movements, leaving them vulnerable. Your sensors showed you what we wanted you to see, Kadesh continued, her voice carrying no hint of boast or threat, just calm certainty. Every primitive satellite we launched contained sophisticated surveillance systems. Every diplomatic mission we accepted gathered intelligence. Every cultural exchange was an opportunity to analyze your vulnerabilities. The first shots were fired not by the Kraxan fleet but by Earth's forces. Weapons that seemed to ignore conventional shields cut through the Empire's proudest vessels with surgical precision. Ships that had survived centuries of combat fell in seconds to technology they couldn't comprehend. Director Patel's voice carried across the Atlantis Prime Command Center. Multiple Kraxan vessels attempting emergency FTL jumps. Quantum inhibitors active and functioning. Naira watched as the mighty Kraxan fleet found itself trapped, unable to flee or effectively fight back. This was not just a battle, it was the culmination of centuries of human ingenuity and patience. We could have revealed ourselves earlier, she transmitted to the increasingly desperate Kraxan command. We could have joined the galactic community centuries ago. But we saw what you did to developing civilizations. We watched as you divided them, weakened them, and ultimately enslaved them. So we waited. We built. We prepared. The battle lasted less than 30 minutes. When it ended, the greatest fleet in the history of the Kraxan Empire lay in ruins, its survivors floating helplessly in space as Earth vessels began systematic capture operations. In Atlantis Prime's command center, Naira received confirmation that similar scenes were playing out across 17 star systems. Earth had launched its liberation campaign simultaneously, using FTL technology that made Kraxan drives look primitive in comparison. As she watched Grand Marshal VYX Thor's surrender transmission, Naira reflected on the path that had led to this moment. Humanity hadn't hidden their true capabilities out of fear but out of wisdom. They had understood that true strength lay not in displaying power but in choosing the perfect moment to reveal it. The age of empire was over. The age of liberation had begun. Rising tide. The captured Kraxan soldiers stared in stunned silence as their transport descended through Earth's atmosphere, breaking through the cloud cover to reveal what lay beneath the waves. Through the vessel's transparent hull, they watched as massive sections of the Pacific Ocean parted, revealing the true scope of human achievement, Atlantis Prime in all its glory. The underwater city stretched for hundreds of kilometers, its architecture a perfect fusion of form and function. Massive energy collectors absorbed thermal energy from deep-sea vents, while quantum field generators maintained vast air pockets without the need for physical barriers. It was a civilization that had evolved not despite its oceanic environment, but because of it. First tactician Zareth, now a prisoner of war, pressed her crystalline appendages against the viewport. "How," she whispered. "How did we miss this?" Commander Kai Okoro, their escort, allowed himself a small smile. "You saw exactly what we wanted you to see. Your deep space sensors can't penetrate our oceans effectively, a limitation we discovered centuries ago when we first detected your probe ships. Instead of trying to hide our activities, we simply gave you something else to focus on." The transport glided through a quantum gateway, another technology that defied Kraxan understanding, and emerged inside a vast docking facility. Hundreds of ships were under construction, their designs unlike anything in known space. Rather than the rigid, geometric shapes favored by most spacefaring races, these vessels seemed almost organic, their hulls flowing like liquid metal. In a secure conference chamber deep within Atlantis Prime, Admiral Naira Kadesh met with the Terran Defense Council. Holographic displays showed real-time updates from across 17 star systems as Earth's hidden fleets systematically dismantled the Kraxan Empire's power structure. "The Proxima Centauri campaign is proceeding ahead of schedule," reported Admiral James Henderson, his hologram flickering slightly as quantum entanglement compensated for the vast distance. "The Kraxan orbital platforms surrendered without firing a shot. Their ground forces are another matter. They're dug in around their primary mining operations." Naira nodded, studying the tactical overlays. "They're protecting their graviton extraction facilities. Without those resources, their remaining fleets will be stuck using conventional FTL drives." She turned to another hologram. Director Patel, what's the status of the liberation forces? Raja's hologram gestured, bringing up new data streams. Better than expected. Once the subjugated species realized we could actually defeat the Kraxen, underground resistance movements emerged on every occupied world. They're providing crucial intelligence and support for our ground operations. The room fell silent as a new alert flashed across the displays. Grand Admiral Kex-11, Supreme Commander of all Kraxen military forces, had issued a galaxy-wide transmission. This is an official declaration of total war, the translator rendered his complex harmonics into Earth standard. The Kraxen Empire will not bow to primitive upstarts. We have ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Our technology is supreme. Our might is absolute. This brief success by the humans will be answered with dash. The transmission cut off abruptly. A moment later, Director Patel smiled. The Kraxen capital fleet just attempted to launch from their primary shipyards in the Denebola system. Attempted being the operative word. New footage appeared, showing massive Kraxen warships rising from their docking cradles, only to freeze in mid-air, caught in fields of twisted spacetime that rendered their engines useless. As predicted, they never considered that we might have infiltrated their shipyards centuries ago, Naira explained to the Council. Every major vessel they've built in the last 100 years contains quantum triggers we can activate at will. Their entire capital fleet has been neutralized without firing a shot. In the waters around Atlantis Prime, more of Earth's hidden capabilities were revealing themselves. Massive manufacturing complexes that had been disguised as deep ocean trenches began producing new vessels at impossible speeds, using automated systems and artificial intelligence that the Kraxen had deemed theoretically impossible. Commander Okoro led his prisoners through a section of the city dedicated to technological development. Your empire's fundamental mistake, he explained, was assuming that technological progress followed a linear path. You believed that since we hadn't developed certain basic technologies, we couldn't possibly have more advanced ones. Zaratha's crystalline structure flickered with complex emotions. But how? The energy requirements alone. We went in different directions, Kai explained. While you focused on brute force approaches, bigger ships, more powerful weapons, we explored efficiency. Your empire's entire power generation capacity equals what we produce in a single deep-sea thermal tap. Your most advanced AI can barely manage a fleet of 10,000 ships. Ours can coordinate millions while simultaneously running our cities and manufacturing centers. Above them, through the quantum-stabilized water ceiling, they could see more ships emerging from hidden bays. Each one represented a different approach to space travel and combat, developed in secret while humanity played the role of a primitive species. In her private command center, Admiral Kadesh received a priority communication from the Liberation Fleet near the Kraxen homeworld. The hologram showed a face she recognized, Professor Himiko Tanaka, Earth's foremost xenobiologist. Admiral, you need to see this, Himiko's expression was grave. We've accessed the Kraxen Central Archives. The reason they've been so aggressive about conquering other species, they're dying. Their entire species is suffering from genetic degradation caused by their own attempts at engineered evolution. They've been harvesting genetic material from conquered species, trying to save themselves. Naira leaned back in her chair, processing this information. How long? Without intervention? 3 generations at most. Their empire wasn't just built on conquest, it was built on desperation. The admiral was silent for a long moment, watching the tactical displays as more Kraxen forces surrendered across the galaxy. They had prepared for this moment for centuries, ready to free the galaxy from tyranny. But now, there was a choice to be made. Would humanity simply replace one empire with another? Or could they find a different path? Contact the Terran Defense Council, she finally ordered. And get me a direct channel to whatever remains of the Kraxen leadership. It's time to discuss terms, not just of surrender, but of survival. As her orders were relayed, Naira Kadesh stood at her viewport, watching the endless dance of ships and submarines moving through the clear waters around Atlantis Prime. Humanity had hidden its strength for centuries, preparing for war. Perhaps now they could show another kind of strength, the strength to forge peace from the ashes of conflict. Waves of liberation. The Nyx AI resistance fighters watched in awe as Earth's liberation fleet emerged from quantum space above their homeworld. For 3,000 years, their people had lived under Kraxan dominion, their once proud civilization reduced to providing resources and labor for their conquerors. Now, they witnessed something they had never thought possible, Kraxan warships fleeing before an superior force. Commander Liana Dharma stood on the bridge of the TDF Magellan, watching as precision strikes disabled the orbital defense platforms without destroying them. "Signal the resistance leaders," she ordered. "Tell them to begin Phase 2. Across the crystalline cities of Nyx Prime, hidden bunkers opened. Weapons and shields that had been accumulated in secret for centuries emerged into the light. The Resistance had planned this moment for generations, coordinating with Earth's deep-cover operatives to prepare for the day of liberation. In Atlantis Prime, Admiral Naira Kadesh monitored simultaneous liberation operations across a dozen systems. The holographic command center displayed a symphony of coordinated military action unprecedented in galactic history. But it wasn't the battles that held her attention, it was the humanitarian operations running alongside them. "Medical ships have reached the Centauri colonies," Director Patel reported. "Professor Tanaka's team has begun distributing the genetic repair protocols to the affected Kraxan populations there. Early results are promising." Naira nodded, studying the data streams. The decision to help the Kraxan had been controversial, but necessary. And the civilian response? Mixed. Some see it as weakness. Others. Raj smiled slightly. Others are beginning to understand that Earth's strength lies not just in our ships and weapons, but in our ability to choose a different path. The tactical displays shifted, showing new data from the Rigel sector. The Kraxan's last major fleet concentration had abandoned their defensive positions, but instead of retreating, they were moving to attack one of their own former colony worlds. "They're targeting the Meridian Archives," Commander Kai Okoro's voice came through the quantum link. "Our intelligence suggests it contains records of their genetic engineering programs, and evidence of experiments performed on subject species. They're trying to erase their crimes," Naira realized. "Signal all available ships in the sector. We need to preserve those archives, not for punishment, but for healing." The battle for the Meridian Archives became a turning point. Earth vessels using advanced quantum drives arrived just as the Kraxan fleet began their bombardment. What followed wasn't just a military engagement, it was a demonstration of how far human technology had evolved in secret. The Earth ships didn't just fight, they rewrote the rules of space combat. Quantum fields redirected enemy fire back at its sources. Temporal buffers predicted and countered tactical maneuvers before they began. Ships seemed to phase through solid matter, appearing inside enemy formations to disable them with precise, non-lethal strikes. First Tactician Zareth, now serving as a liaison between Earth and surrendered Kraxan forces, watched the battle recordings with her former enemies. "Your technology," she observed, her crystalline form pulsing with complex emotions. "It doesn't just surpass ours, it operates on completely different principles." Professor Tanaka nodded. "We had centuries to explore alternatives. While your empire focused on dominating space, we learned to work with it. Your ships fight against physics. Ours dance with it." In the Nyx AI capital, now free for the first time in millennia, Commander Dharma met with the planet's newly formed provisional government. The former resistance leaders were learning to be administrators, helped by Earth advisors who had experienced their own centuries of hidden preparation. "We don't seek to replace the Kraxan Empire with our own," Liana explained to the Council. "Earth's goal is to help each world rebuild, to find its own path forward. We've had centuries to perfect our technology and systems of governance. We'll share what we've learned, but the choices must be yours." The liberation of occupied worlds continued, but it wasn't simply a military campaign. Earth vessels brought more than just weapons, they carried medical technology, educational systems, and the accumulated knowledge of centuries of hidden development. In deep space, aboard the diplomatic vessel TDF Mandela, representatives from 20 formerly subjugated species gathered for the first time as equals. The ship's quantum fields allowed instantaneous translation between dozens of languages, facilitating communication that had been impossible under Kraxan rule. The galaxy stands at a crossroads, Admiral Kadesh addressed the gathering. For too long, power has flowed from the barrel of a gun. Earth hid its strength not just to survive, but to show that there is another way. We developed our technology in secret not just to defeat the Kraxan, but to prove that progress doesn't require domination. The delegates listened as she outlined Earth's proposal, a galactic cooperative, where each species would maintain its independence while sharing knowledge and resources. The Kraxan would be offered membership, not as conquerors, but as equals, once they had made restitution for their past actions. In the oceans of Earth, more hidden cities were revealing themselves. What had begun as military necessity had evolved into a unique civilization, one that had learned to thrive in the most challenging environment on their planet. Now, that experience was proving invaluable in helping other worlds adapt and rebuild. The liberation fleets continued their careful dance across the galaxy, but with each passing day, fewer shots were fired. Word spread of Earth's approach, not just their overwhelming military power, but their commitment to healing rather than vengeance. Kraxan commanders, seeing hope for their species' survival, increasingly chose surrender over destruction. As the third phase of liberation drew to a close, Admiral Kadesh stood in her command center, watching the galaxy reshape itself. Centuries of preparation had given humanity the power to destroy an empire. But it was their choice to build something new in its place that would truly change the course of galactic history. We hid beneath the waves, she murmured, not just to survive, but to learn who we truly wanted to be when we finally emerged. The deep current. The Kraxan diplomatic delegation descended through the waters of the Pacific in a specially designed transport, their escort vessels gliding silently through the quantum-stabilized corridors between Earth's hidden cities. Even after weeks of negotiations, the sight of humanity's underwater civilization left them speechless. High Commander Vex Nor, one of the few senior Kraxan officials to survive the initial conflict, watched as they passed through the ancient remnants of what had once been a submarine volcanic chain. What appeared to be natural geological formations were actually carefully crafted concealment systems, hiding vast manufacturing complexes and research facilities. 300 years ago, Professor Ibrahim Hassan explained to the delegation, our long-range sensors detected your first probe ships entering the solar system. Instead of panicking or rushing to reveal ourselves, we chose a different path. The professor's quantum tablet displayed historical records from Earth's first contact protocols. We knew we couldn't match your space-based technology immediately, so we turned our greatest weakness into our greatest strength. The transport passed through a massive underwater archway, revealing one of humanity's most closely guarded secrets, the Genesis Complex. Stretched across what had once been the Marianas Trench, the facility housed thousands of quantum computing cores, each one more powerful than the entire Kraxan Empire's combined computational capacity. While we maintained a carefully crafted image of primitive space capability above the waves, Ibrahim continued, down here we were pushing the boundaries of science itself. Our first breakthrough came when we realized that water wasn't just a hiding place, it was the key to entirely new forms of technology. In a secure conference chamber within Atlantis Prime, Admiral Naira Kadesh met with the Terran Historical Council. The time had come to share the full story of humanity's hidden evolution with their galactic neighbors. Project Deepwater began in 2084, she explained to the assembled alien diplomats. Our scientists discovered that the precise atomic structure of water could be used to create quantum computational matrices far more stable than anything possible in a vacuum. What your civilizations tried to achieve in space, we perfected in the oceans. Holographic displays showed the progression of human technology over 3 centuries. While maintaining a convincing facade of normal technological development above the surface, beneath the waves humanity had taken quantum leaps in understanding the fundamental nature of reality itself. The oceans became our laboratory, our shield, and our inspiration, Director Patel added. We learned to manipulate gravity by studying deep-sea pressure gradients. Our quantum communication systems were perfected by analyzing how marine life coordinates over vast distances. Even our ship designs were influenced by the fluid dynamics of marine organisms. In the Mariana Manufacturing Complex, Commander Kai Okoro led another group of diplomatic observers through rows of automated assembly lines. Here, advanced AI systems coordinated the construction of vessels that seemed to defy the known laws of physics. Every primitive satellite we launched contained sophisticated sensor suites, he explained. Every clumsy space maneuver was carefully calculated to reinforce your assumptions about our capabilities. Meanwhile, down here, we were building something unprecedented, a civilization that could exist completely hidden from space-based observation. The observers watched in amazement as massive quantum forges shaped materials that shouldn't exist, creating hull plating that could phase through normal matter, engines that bent spacetime itself, and weapons that could disable entire fleets without destroying them. Your empire's fundamental mistake, Kai continued, was assuming that technological progress followed a predictable path. You thought that since we hadn't achieved certain visible milestones, we couldn't possibly have surpassed you in other areas. In her private quarters, Admiral Kadesh reviewed historical footage with Professor Tanaka. The recordings showed the early days of the underwater expansion, when millions of humans had volunteered to leave the surface world and help build a hidden civilization. The hardest part wasn't the technology, Himiko noted, it was maintaining the secret. For 3 centuries, we had to coordinate every aspect of surface civilization to maintain the illusion of normal development. Every space launch, every diplomatic contact, every technological advancement visible to the galaxy had to be carefully choreographed. The footage showed vast underwater cities being constructed in perfect secrecy, while above the waves humanity played its role flawlessly. The contrast was stark, primitive rockets launching satellites while quantum ships conducted stealth missions throughout the solar system, basic space stations being assembled while underwater shipyards produced vessels that could outmatch anything in the known galaxy. We turned our entire civilization into a strategic deception, Naira mused. Not out of fear, but out of wisdom. We understood that true strength lies not in displaying power, but in choosing the right moment to reveal it. In the deep-sea research facilities near the Antarctic shelf, First Tactician Zareth studied the historical records of human technological development. The quantum archives showed how Earth's scientists had taken radically different approaches to problems that the Kraxan Empire had considered solved. You never tried to break through technological barriers, she realized. You simply went around them. While we fought against the laws of physics, you learned to dance with them. Professor Hassan nodded. We had the luxury of time and secrecy. Without the pressure to demonstrate immediate results, we could explore paths that seemed impossible. Many of our greatest breakthroughs came from studying the ocean itself, its currents, its creatures, its fundamental nature. The day's diplomatic tours concluded in the heart of Atlantis Prime, where the full scope of human achievement was finally revealed. The gathered representatives witnessed how humanity had created not just a hidden military force, but an entire parallel civilization, one that had evolved in harmony with Earth's oceans while preparing to reshape the galaxy's future. We chose the harder path, Admiral Kadesh addressed the assembly. We could have revealed ourselves earlier, could have joined the galactic community as a minor power. Instead, we dedicated centuries to secret preparation, not just to survive, but to ensure that when we finally emerged, we could truly change things for the better. As the delegates departed, they carried with them a profound understanding. Earth's oceans had hidden more than ships and cities, they had concealed a civilization that had fundamentally reimagined what was possible, proving that sometimes the greatest achievements are the ones that remain unseen until the perfect moment. New tides. 1 year after Earth's emergence, the galaxy had transformed in ways that even humanity's most optimistic planners hadn't predicted. The Great Hall of the newly established Galactic Concordat floated in high orbit above Earth, its quantum architecture allowing representatives from hundreds of worlds to gather in person while their ships hovered in formation nearby, not as weapons of war, but as symbols of a new era. Admiral Naira Kadesh stood at the Grand Observation Deck, watching vessels from formerly subjugated species moving freely through space. Among them, she could spot the distinctive crystalline shapes of cracks in ships, no longer bearing the Empire's colors but instead displaying the markers of individual worlds and systems that had chosen their own paths forward. The latest reports from the Genetic Restoration Project are encouraging. Professor Tanaka approached, her tablet displaying complex DNA sequences. The Craxan extinction crisis has been averted. Their scientists are already incorporating the healing protocols into long-term preservation strategies. And their response? Naira asked, though she could guess from the professor's smile. Gratitude, mostly. And confusion. They still struggle to understand why we helped them after defeating them. Himiko's eyes sparkled. I told them to think of it as a very long-term investment in galactic stability. Below them, Earth's oceans still held their secrets, but now they served a different purpose. The hidden cities had become centers of learning, where representatives from across the galaxy came to study the unique path of human technological development. The Mariana Manufacturing Complex, once dedicated to building weapons of war, now produced humanitarian vessels and exploration ships. Commander Kai Okoro led a delegation through one of the new training facilities in Atlantis Prime. Young officers from dozens of species learned together, sharing perspectives that would have been impossible under the old order. The key was never the technology itself, he explained to the group. It was understanding that progress doesn't have to follow a predetermined path. Each civilization brings its own unique insights, its own way of seeing the universe. In the quantum computing cores of the Genesis complex, first tactician Zareth worked alongside human scientists, her crystalline form interfacing directly with systems that merged Craxan biological computing with Earth's quantum technologies. The collaboration had already produced breakthroughs that neither civilization could have achieved alone. We spent millennia believing that power came from domination, she observed to Professor Hassan. We never considered that our greatest achievements might come from cooperation. The professor nodded, watching as the hybrid systems processed data in ways that defied traditional physics. Sometimes the longest path is the shortest distance between 2 points. Humanity hid beneath the waves not just to survive, but to evolve beyond the cycle of conquest and subjugation. In her office in the Concordat headquarters, Admiral Kadesh reviewed reports from across the galaxy. The transition hadn't been entirely smooth, centuries of imperial rule had left deep scars on many worlds. But the framework established by Earth's emergence had provided a foundation for healing. Director Patel entered, his quantum tablet displaying updates from the various reconstruction projects. The last of the Craxan defensive installations has been converted to a medical research facility, he reported. And the former mining colonies in the Centauri sector have completed their environmental restoration ahead of schedule. And the deeper changes? Naira asked, knowing that rebuilding infrastructure was the easy part. Better than we hoped. The quantum education networks are helping bridge cultural gaps that the Empire spent millennia creating. Former enemies are discovering they have more in common than they thought. The Admiral stood, walking to her own observation window. Earth hung below, its oceans now known to hold not just humanity's hidden strength, but the key to a different kind of future. We spent 3 centuries preparing for war, she mused, but in the end, we achieved something far more difficult, peace. Across the galaxy, the changes were visible in ways both large and small. Former Craxan military bases had been transformed into scientific outposts and cultural centers. The quantum transportation network, once reserved for Earth's hidden fleet, now connected distant worlds in ways that promoted understanding and cooperation. In the underwater cities, new sections were being constructed to accommodate delegations from across known space. The oceans that had hidden humanity's greatest secrets now served as a reminder that strength could take many forms. Commander Dharma, overseeing the integration of new member worlds into the Concordat's defense network, often reflected on how completely the galaxy's power structure had shifted. The massive fleets that had emerged from Earth's oceans still existed, but their primary mission now was exploration and humanitarian support. The greatest victory, she told a group of new cadets from various species, wasn't defeating the Kraxan Empire. It was proving that there's always another way, if you're patient enough to find it. As the first year of the new era drew to a close, representatives from across the galaxy gathered again in the Concordat Hall. Admiral Kadesh stood before them, preparing to outline the next phase of galactic reconstruction. But before she began her formal address, she shared a simple truth that had guided humanity's long preparation. We hid beneath the waves not just to protect ourselves, but to become something new, she told the assembled delegates. For 3 centuries, we asked ourselves what kind of civilization we wanted to be when we finally emerged. The answer wasn't about power or technology or military might. It was about having the wisdom to use our strength to break the cycle of dominance and fear. She gestured to the gathered representatives, former enemies and allies, conquered and conquerors, all now working together to forge a different future. Earth's oceans taught us patience. They taught us that true strength often lies hidden, that power can flow like water, finding new paths rather than forcing its way through obstacles. Now it's time to share those lessons with the galaxy. The hall erupted in appreciation, not with the forced uniformity of the imperial era, but with the chaotic, beautiful diversity of truly free worlds choosing to work together. Above Earth, ships from 100 worlds moved in complex patterns, their crews learning the dance of cooperation rather than conquest. And deep beneath the waves, in the cities that had hidden humanity's greatest achievement, new generations prepared to explore not just space, but the endless possibilities that came with choosing to evolve beyond the old ways of thinking. The oceans had hidden Earth's strength long enough for humanity to learn how to use it wisely. Now they would help teach the galaxy that sometimes the greatest power lies not in what you can do, but in what you choose to do with your abilities.